Good evening. Debate Night is the only programme in Scotland where you get to ask the questions, answering on our panel this evening. From Scottish Labour, Pam Duncan-Glancy is the MSP for Glasgow, the party spokesperson for social justice and social security. Before entering politics, Pam worked in communications for the NHS and has been a long-time campaigner for equalities and human rights. Last year, she was named Hero of the Year at the Holyrood Political Awards. From the SNP, John Nicholson is the MP for Ochil and South Perthshire and spokesperson for digital, culture, media and sport. Educated at Glasgow University, then Harvard. John previously worked as a journalist and broadcaster for ITV, BBC, LBC and Talk Radio. Also with us tonight, co-leader of the Scottish Green Party, Patrick Harvie, an MSP for Glasgow. Patrick is also the Government Minister for Zero Carbon Buildings, Active Travel and Tenants' Right. From the Scottish Conservatives, Ros McCall is the MSP for Mid-Scotland and Fife, elected last year following the resignation of Dean Lockhart. She previously ran a distribution business with her husband. And finally tonight, David Clegg is the editor of The Courier. Before that, as political editor of the Daily Record, he broke the story that Alex Salmond was facing allegations of sexual assault. Although he was later acquitted, the story won David Journalist of the Year, Political Journalist of the Year and Scoop of the Year as well at the Scottish Press Awards. Please welcome them all to Debate Night. And welcome too to our studio audience here in Glenrothes. It's our first time with you in Fife. Great to be with you this evening. Thank you for having us. You can join in the discussion from home, wherever you are in Scotland, at BBC Debate Night. If you want to give us a follow on social media, the hashtag is BBCDN to take part in the discussion on social media. And you can catch up with the show also afterwards on our podcast, the Debate Night podcast, available after the programme on BBC Sounds. So let's get started. Our first question of the night comes from Martin Butler. Martin.
Most people accept that it is essential that we reduce our carbon emissions, and that increasing recycling is key to this. So, was the decision to have the Green Party, who have no experience in government and bringing projects to completion, a foolhardy one? And was it always doomed to end up as chaotically as it has?
Thank you. Patrick Harvie, delighted to have you with us. It's always good to have you on Debate Night. You weren't supposed to be here, though, tonight. It was Lorna Slater, the Minister responsible, was due to be with us until this morning, but apparently she had a previous engagement. Tell us more.
Yeah, Lorna had to move a motion in the chamber right before decision time, so she wouldn't have been able to get here on time. But look, the reality is that whether it's in relation to carbon emissions, whether it's in relation to local environmental concerns, you know, every town and community in Scotland will have seen cans and bottles and detritus around that should be getting recycled, or indeed whether it's to do with the jobs and the economic opportunity from this. The deposit return scheme is going to be a really effective way of delivering all of those objectives.
And everyone agrees in this scheme.
Not rocket science.
However, Fergus
Other countries
Ewing,
have done this
a Scottish Government Minister, says this scheme is in tatters. Today, it was revealed only 15% of companies in Scotland have actually signed up for this scheme to meet the deadline yesterday.
But the critical thing is that that covers over 90% of the products that are going to be on your shelves right now. You know,
that means that small business owners that are the people who haven't signed up. If 90% of the volume is only 15% of the companies, what those statistics tell us is that's the big companies like Diageo that have done it.
And what we've done, announced last week, is a new package, over £20 million of support for those small businesses. We're encouraging them to register because we want them to participate in the scheme. There'll be advantages from them from a scheme that works well, as there have been in so many other countries. But the scheme is not punitive. It's not about issuing penalties. It's all about support and encouragement for those small businesses to register. That's what we're keen to do. And I genuinely do regret that some political parties, and indeed the UK government, are putting out messages that increase the uncertainty for those small businesses.
The three contenders for the SNP leadership, none of them say the scheme will go ahead in its current form. So it's dead in the water.
No, the scheme is going to go ahead. One candidate has talked about a delay in compliance, a grace period, so-called, for small producers, and that's something the government is already looking at. You know, obviously you have to work through the detail of exactly how you're going to define which producers get the grace period, how long it works, so you have to work through the detail, not just issue a press release about it.
Martin, this is your question. What do you think?
I feel that particularly for small businesses, they're being asked to sign up for a scheme, but the detail isn't there. They don't know what they're signing up for. You're asking them to write a blank cheque. They're just coming out of COVID. There's energy prices that are killing them. And now they're being asked to sign a blank cheque for something they know nothing about.
Well, it's not a blank cheque.
Man on the back row here. On you go.
Can I ask the panel, do you think the Scottish Government's jumped the gun on this? Because if I'm right, they need Parliament legislation for Westminster to actually implement it. Because the internal market states that Scotland can't put the price of goods up in England, so they'll block it.
OK, John Nicholson.
Well, that's not actually true, though it is true that the Westminster Government is just itching to take on the Scottish Parliament on as many issues as they possibly can. But look, all of us agree that in the aftermath of COP, we've got to do something about recycling. We've got to do something about the massive amounts of waste. When you drive around your constituencies, as those of us who are MPs or MSPs do, is absolutely disgraceful.
John, we're all in agreement on that, but that's not the question.
Right, so let's work out how we can make it work rather than simply pull it apart. I remember. Do you remember the stooshy? Great. Well, let's build on what we all want to achieve. Remember the stooshy about plastic bags? And I remember reading in the papers how it was never going to work, how it would destroy the livelihoods of many small businesses because people wouldn't buy as much in shops. And now, who would want to reverse the progress we made on that? We've slashed the amount of waste on plastic bags. Clearly, there are teething problems with this, and it'd be daft to pretend that there aren't, but let's make it work as a system.
No answer. Is this the same as the plastic bag charge when that was introduced?
No, I think it's ridiculous to say it's the same as the plastic bags. Actually, there was a plan for that, and I'm sorry, but Patrick, to say that we need to work out the detail, when today there was an SSI brought to Parliament to look at the punishment measures for small businesses if they don't comply, I would have liked to think that the government would have planned the detail a fair bit in advance. And the other point on the rubbish on our streets, we know only too well the rubbish on our streets. We've seen it in Glasgow, the area that I represent, and we don't solve that by lining the pockets of organisations like BIFA, a private sector company who are going to make a fortune out of this plan. That's not how we do this.
I do need to take that on, because hundreds of millions of pounds have been invested in that. Not your money as taxpayers, not public money. It's the big producers. They're the ones, because the cost that they put in are about the number of units that they sell. So it's the big producers who have invested hundreds of millions of pounds, creating jobs, making sure that the reverse vending machines, which you will start to see in your communities over the coming weeks and months, the machines that you'll put your disused bottles and containers into, those are all in train. The vehicles that are going to move these products around are all being ordered right now.
Hopefully not too many vehicles, because it's supposed to be a green scheme, isn't it?
All of this investment in absolutely environmental objectives that other countries are way ahead of us. This is us catching up.
Right.
It's overdue.
Well, it's the people in this room
to delay
paying
it
the
now
20p,
would be to
Patrick.
waste those
so
hundreds of millions of pounds
from
of
them.
investment.
Lady on the aisle here in the red jacket. Yes, on you go.
Thank you. I just want to go back to one of your points that you made right at the beginning there, that this wasn't punitive. Well, I can tell you that the families that I work with on a daily basis are finding it extremely worrying that it is punitive to them because of the cost that it's going to be. And then how do they get these cans and containers back when they don't drive, when they don't have the means to take them back? And where do they take them back to? Surely they should be able to take them back to a local shop, but no, that won't be the answer. They have to take them to these machines. So it is very punitive.
You will be able to take
hang on a second, your lady on the aisle here as well. On you go. Yes.
Yes, I would like to say that here in Fife, we have green bins which take all plastics now, including soft plastics. We have 2 bottle banks near us where we take our glass bottles. But if this scheme goes ahead, then we'll have to drive.
Can I comment on the point?
Let me just take one more. This lady here wants to say something. Yeah, on you go.
Yeah, I would just like to say it works in Europe, so why wouldn't it work here? And also, am I incorrect in having read that Westminster's going to introduce the exact same thing in 2025? What are you on about?
There is a Westminster scheme coming in, and Rose McCall, this works in other countries, so why not here? What's the problem?
But the thing is, it should work here, and you're 100% correct. We should have this process here, and it has been stated, and you've stated it twice already, that there's actually nobody against this. We want to see better quality recycling, so that's actually the way we should be going, and it is going to be coming forward. And part of the problem we have here is that because we're doing this cross-border issue, then we've actually got two schemes working that are going to butt heads.
No.
And yes. And I want to go back to the point that was actually made earlier about small businesses, because you're talking about large businesses or others that are carrying this forward. But there's a lot of small businesses out there who, up till very, very recently, in fact, earlier on today, had an option in front of them to either buy into this or possibly go completely bust because of the amount of money that they might have to pay, or not be able to deal in Scotland. And that was the option, two of them, and it doesn't surprise me at all that only 15% have actually signed up. It has been ill thought out. It is a problem. I'm sorry, I just have to comment on what you said about both of you. Actually, when this comes down to the bottom line here, we're going to be looking at, you can't crush a can. That won't happen anymore. If that happens, you'll not get your money back. There's going to be distribution issues down the chain, because yes, 20 pence is going to go on at the front end, but that's also going to be multiplied when it goes down the chain. So there's a possibility that what you're buying right now is going to cost you far more. And then at the end of that, you're going to have to put it in a bag, take it to the supermarket, and make sure you put it in. It's not going to be quite as easy. All of this should have been worked out, and it hasn't been.
Why wasn't it worked out? Why wasn't it worked out, Patrick Harvey?
All of this has been worked out and is following a model that's been well tried and tested in a number of other countries. And some of these concerns were expressed in those other countries ahead of their systems coming in. And you know what they found? Once it's up and running, people realise that there are solutions to the concerns, that they can adjust the scheme to make sure that it takes account of any impacts on people. And it works. It gets over 90% recycling rates in some of these countries.
But you're accepting the scheme will have to change simply on the basis of who's going to be the next First Minister. This scheme is going to have to change, isn't it?
Well, one candidate in the election has said that he wants to look at a grace period. That's already the government's position. That's
Others have talked about pausing the whole scheme.
Well, you know, if
anybody who forms the next government after Nicola Sturgeon has left office wants to tear up good, positive, environmentally responsible policies, I think that would be a huge mistake.
David Clyde, let me take back to the question here. Was the decision to have the Green Party, we have their co-leader here tonight, who have no experience in government and bringing projects to completion, a foolhardy one and always doomed to end up as chaotically as it has? What do you think?
I'm not sure if the clear problems here can be put down to the fact the Greens are in government. I think it does speak to an issue of competence for the Scottish government, but I think it's maybe even more serious than that. I think it's actually a test of whether politics can function normally here, whether the Scottish Parliament is able to actually deliver something which should be quite simple to do. They're agreed in the principle that they all want to do it. We've heard that from all the parties here. We've heard that it's happening happily across Europe, which also is the case. It's been talked about for years. I haven't been covering day-to-day politics in Scotland for 3.5 years now, and they were talking about it while I was still there. So what that tells us is, if this is a scheme that everybody wants, if we know it is imperative for the future of the planet that we make progress in this area, and if it's being done elsewhere, it shouldn't be beyond the wit of the Scottish Parliament and the parties within it to make this work. So what that is going to require is, I think, a little bit less antagonism and a little bit more modesty almost about the fact, yes, listen, there's serious difficulties here. As a newspaper editor, I can testify to the fact that is true. I'm getting contact from two people in particular, small business owners that work in this sector that are worried about the impact it's going to have on their business at a time when their energy prices are going through the roof. They're coming out of COVID, especially in the type of areas that this scheme is going to be particularly impactful on, and from people who are on a very tight budget, are worried about this cost going on to single-use bottles and plastic, which they use and they look for cheap, and 20p can be almost a 30 or 40% uplift on some of the things that we're talking about here. So there is definitely problems. People are worried about it. These guys shouting at each other about it isn't going to help. What they need to do is get together and sort it out, because it should happen and there's no reason why it shouldn't.
Into our audience. Man in the back row.
surely this type of issue should be a United Kingdom sort of issue. It's the cross-border issue that I have in thinking about businesses competing. There's some products from England will actually stop being sold in the shops in this country because of what's being imposed on Scotland.
That's part of the complication with this man on the back row here. Yep.
The problem with something like this is that the devil's in the detail. And this government doesn't seem to be very good at the detail. And it's showed that in the last year on different things.
Thank you. And gentleman on the front row down here.
You said that this is a long time in coming. So why is it taking so long to get this up and running if you think it's a good idea? And why are you spending millions and millions of pounds on this? And when will we see results?
Well, we're getting industry to spend the millions and millions of pounds on it, not the public purse. And I think that's an important principle. It's about the polluter pays. These are the people who produce these materials. They should be the ones who pay for it. We will see results. You're going to start seeing these machines start to appear in communities over the coming weeks and months. And the scheme's go-live date is the middle of August. I think it is genuinely disappointing that it had to be delayed because of COVID. You know, it could have been done before that. A number of other government policies had to be delayed, understandably, because of the pandemic. But, you know, this is stuff that's been legislated for by the Scottish Parliament. The UK Parliament apparently is going to, sometime later, on a slower basis, on a narrower basis, have an equivalent scheme that doesn't look like it's even going to aim to achieve as much. And you know what? There are a number of other countries that do have different schemes operating within a single state. There's a number of schemes that operate in Canada at a regional basis. There's other approaches that we've learned from other countries as well.
I'm sure
there is nothing
all
beyond the ability of Scotland to deliver this scheme and make a success.
We'll come back, I'm sure, and discuss it again. Tonight, we are in Glenrothes. Next week, we're going to be in Greenock. The week after that, on the Tuesday, it is a SNP Leadership Special edition of Debate Night with all the candidates for the SNP leadership. If you'd like to come along and join us and be in the audience for that show, just go to the website. It's bbc.co.uk/debate night. Click on the link. It takes you just a couple of minutes to apply. Let's go to our second question of the night, which comes from Stuart Duffy. Stuart.
With a special Brexit deal for Northern Ireland, is there only one route back into the single market for Scotland, which after all had the highest Remain vote in the UK?
Thank you. So we hear the Windsor framework is going to give the Northern Ireland this unique status within the EU single market, with also within the UK internal market. The Prime Minister says that this is the best deal in the world. Rose McCall, why?
Well, I think the Prime Minister has done an excellent job. We had serious issues, and we have to be very mindful of the situation in Northern Ireland. It is a very it's a very delicate situation. I think it's important to actually mention that, and we can't do anything to antagonise that situation. So I think the Prime Minister has done exceptionally well. He's engaged with the EU and come forward with a deal that works for Northern Ireland, because the people in Northern Ireland need to see things moving forward, and I think it's important that we all see things moving forward.
And what about Scotland?
Scotland are allowed to see things moving forward.
OK. So what about us?
OK, well, I think what we've also got to take into consideration is that there is a land border between the EU and Northern Ireland, and that's an important thing to remember. I understand that there are issues and that there's concerns regarding Brexit, but we have to start moving forward. It's a decision that was made. Not necessarily, it's not one I voted for. It's not one I voted for, but it's one that I accept, because I actually do believe that that's what we should do. When people vote for something, we should do is accept the situation and move forward from it. I think that's actually what the Prime Minister has done. We've got to a position now where he's really made massive inroads with the EU, and we've got a very, very good settlement here for moving forward in Northern Ireland.
OK, lady up there is desperately wanting to speak on this. What do you want to say?
What I want to say is, I don't believe a word of that.
Okay.
We have not, over 60% voted to remain. You're talking about a border between the Irish Republic and the Northern Ireland. There's no issues with that. Why would we not have an issue with a border between England and Scotland? You've taken away all our freedom. We can't work abroad. We can't travel as we like. We're going to have to pay a visa. Why? All because England wanted out. We didn't want out. It's OK giving it to Northern Ireland. We deserve the same.
62% of Scots voted to remain, in fact. Answer that woman's point, Ross McCall.
Okay, what I would like to go back to the point is that in the EU member, we were a member state as part of the United Kingdom. And it's very frustrating, and I do accept that it's very frustrating, because in our own political bit, we look at ourselves as United Kingdom as 4 separate nations, but we were one member state. So when it actually came to the referendum, it was important that one member state had a decision, and that's what went through. So there is that juxtaposition, shall we say, for how we look at things, but how it actually was within the EU. So I understand that there was 62% people in Scotland. I was one of them. I am a Remainer. I didn't like the way the process went, but I am pragmatic, and I agree that we have to then start looking as how we move forward. If we keep looking back and we keep looking at how we can return, first and foremost, that's an exceptionally difficult thing to do. We're not meeting any of the targets that we would need to meet as a separate country to get back into the EU, and we have to accept that. We're not meeting any of them. We don't have the gross GDP. We don't have any of them. Sorry, John, but I mean I could go through. We don't have any of them.
Do please run through them.
No, please, you tell me.
Well, you were the one who made the charge. We do meet the criteria, but to pick up on the questioner's point, to pick up on the question, pick up on the questioner's point. Do you remember the Tories fought the last election telling us there was an oven-ready deal? Well, that was a porky, if ever we heard a porky. Yet another porky from Boris Johnson. There was no oven-ready deal. 4 countries in the UK. Of course, Ross's party fought the independence referendum, saying separate but equal, union of equals. We heard all the slogans. England got what it wanted, Wales got what it wanted, now Northern Ireland's got what it wanted. The only country that didn't get what it wanted was Scotland, that voted to remain. And next time you have a Tory chapping your doors, if you see one of those endangered species campaigning round your constituency, remember they told us that it was absolutely impossible to have a border. Scotland could not be independent because we couldn't be an EU country with a border with the UK. Well, there's a truck gone through that argument with this deal that the Prime Minister has just signed. And sadly, people in England have a choice now between 2 hard Brexit parties. You get the Brexit party of the Tories, and you get Keir Starmer's Brexit party. The only way of getting back into the European Union, unlocking all the advantages for young people, is by independence and rejoining the European Union. We must do it.
That's your question answered, Stuart. Pam Duncan Glancy, you're caught in the middle on this.
John, absolutely not. That notion is for the birds, I'm afraid. The notion that actually an independent Scotland would get walked straight back into the EU without meeting any criteria that other nations are asked to meet is for the birds. And do you know what? Here we are, right, 7 years later. Now, 7 years. It took them 7 years to negotiate it. Now, good deal or otherwise, it's ridiculous that it's taken us this long. I couldn't believe it when I seen in the press, oh, there's a deal being negotiated on Brexit. I was like, God, are we back there? Like, it just feels like we're constantly looking backwards. And I'm sorry, but neither of the 2 governments are going to take us forward as a nation at all. We've got both of them trying to stoke grievance, bring up old arguments. That is not what we need now.
Do you remember Keir Starmer promised during his leadership race, very clearly promised, there would be freedom of movement? It was yet another promise that he broke between when he campaigned for the leadership and now running for the leadership. He said there would be freedom of movement and the single market. As soon as he became leader, he shredded that promise. And Labour is now a hard Brexit party. So if you've got a Labour person campaigning round your doors, ask them why the opportunities that are available for people in Northern Ireland shouldn't be available for young Scots.
Let's ask Pam now. What do you say to that, Pam?
Well, so at the time when he said that, I thought, right, this sounds like a reasonable thing to say. Actually, if you think about it, first of all, we don't have a Labour government, as I'm sure you'll have noticed, and you have helped usher in Tory government after Tory government.
Because when was that?
Every time you don't vote Labour at a Westminster election, to be honest with you.
Let's stick to Brexit.
No, I must answer that point. Every single constituency in Scotland could have voted Labour at the last election. You would still have had Boris Johnson as a Prime Minister. It makes no difference whether you vote Labour or not.
Pam, finish your point.
It suits you to have people like Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Let's not kid ourselves here. That's exactly what suits you.
All right.
But it's...
If you're both going to do that, we're going to go to the audience. Lady in the glasses here.
John was saying about how, you know, we should be voting for independence and stuff like that, and then, you know, we would get back into Europe. How long was Nicola Sturgeon in power, and what did she do to actually advance that?
OK,
Zero.
we'll come back to that. And man on the front row down here, yes.
Would EFTA, the European Free Trade Association, be a better trading arrangement for an independent Scotland in the short term?
John Nicholson?
I'm in favour of full European Union membership. Things have changed dramatically since the last independence referendum, when in Brussels they were very keen to help David Cameron. Now the Tories have no friends left in Brussels. And I can tell you this, talking to EU ambassadors, as I do a lot, the mood music has changed dramatically. They are very keen to see a progressive, well-educated, non-corrupt Northern European country like Scotland rejoin. In fact, the Treasury chair, the chair of the Treasury Committee in the German Parliament, a Christian Democrat, a Conservative, said to me, Scotland will gain faster and easier re-entry to the European Union than any applicant in history.
Well, Patrick Harvey, Ash Regan, one of the leadership contenders, is suggesting that EFTA is the fastest way back into Europe. What do you think?
Well, I do disagree with that. EFTA would be one plausible place for Scotland to establish a relationship with other European countries, but it's not a stepping stone toward EU membership. It's a separate organisation. It doesn't give full access to the single market and freedom of movement and so on. It's not a holding area on the way to EU membership. And I think we would need to make a decision. My decision would be that we should be an EU member state, with full representation through the democratic structures of the European Union. And, when I heard Rishi Sunak hailing this deal and saying how wonderful it was that Northern Ireland would have the best of both worlds, full access to the European market and full access to the UK market. I thought, didn't we all have that? That's exactly what we all had. And that economic opportunity has been ripped up. More than the economic opportunity, though, my heart bleeds for the social loss of value from the loss of freedom of movement. For so long, generation after generation after generation, young people, a best chance of seeing another European country was to be rounded up by their own government, marched across fields and ditches and made to murder one another, right? And then after the Second World War, an incredible political change happened. We started building institutions that became the European Union, and young people within the European Union now have the opportunity to decide for themselves if they want to travel, if they want to live somewhere else, if they want to study, make a life somewhere else, or just for enriching their lives, to travel for those purposes. And to see that taken away from another generation of people, taken away by the people who enjoyed that freedom of movement themselves, that rips my heart out. It really does.
I know we have Brexit supporters in the audience. I'd love to hear from you on this. But lady in the second row here, on you go.
Are you not just saying one thing, but actually you don't mean it? Because you're talking about us joining the European Union again, but you want us to depart from England, and it's so divisive. And we're all so tired of these arguments.
We'll still have a border with England. We'll still be a close neighbour and a close friend of England. And I think the best thing about borders is keeping them open. Borders are at their best when they're places that people meet, when people interact, exchange,
but that lady says it's a
contradiction
to support one and be against the other.
No, not at all. I think the opportunity to do what other small independent countries within the European Union do, which is to contribute to that wider policy making at a continent-wide level, but to make their own decisions about domestic matters, that would be an incredible opportunity for Scotland.
Let me hear from the man in the white top on the aisle here. Yeah.
Ros, 7 years on for Brexit, what have been the benefits to Scotland of Brexit?
Well, the first one that springs to mind, and obviously put on the spot, but the first thing that springs to mind was the vaccine that came out.
Can I just no difference was made.
We would not have been able to roll out the vaccine.
That's absolutely untrue. We complete freedom to roll out the vaccine. This is disinformation that the Tories keep repeating. It's simply not true. There was no advantage
John, let the man speak.
to Brexit for the vaccine.
Hang on.
The UK government actually used European legislation to rush through the vaccine programme. So that's dead in the wood. So, again, I'm asking you, what benefits of Brexit have been to Scotland?
It's a short.
Absolutely. And, no, and I have to look. I'm being as honest because that's the way it is. And you know, John has mentioned before that you know, people knocking on your door, etc. That's something I do regularly. And
so go on, be honest. Are there no benefits? I mean, if you don't see any benefits, just tell us.
Yeah, I have difficulty with it.
Okay, let's park that there.
Well said.
David Clegg.
I find that whole conversation quite depressing, really. I think it's possible to hold more than one thought in your mind at once. So I think we can probably all agree that Brexit's not been a great idea. I think we can also probably see that the previous UK administration acted, and I grew up in Northern Ireland, so I have an emotional involvement here, acted in a reckless and irresponsible way.
Absolutely.
In the way that they dealt with this, what is indeed a very fragile situation in Northern Ireland. A police officer was shot last week picking his kids up from football. This is a serious issue. So I think what also follows from that, though, is that there is a unique situation going on there, and I think we should also acknowledge that Rishi Sunak has taken a more responsible approach and has repaired relations with the EU quite successfully, and the deal that he has got there, in my view, is a significant improvement on where they were and is an important geopolitical step. I then find it slightly uncomfortable, and I don't think I'm not drawing malign motives in this, but to say, why can't Scotland get what Northern Ireland's got, or Northern Ireland's got what it wanted? That's not really a fair reflection of the situation, I think, and I think we need to be careful about the political leverage and the political advantage we try to take out of that situation. It doesn't stop the fact that Scotland is not seeing any benefits of Brexit, that the whole process has been a shambles, and there's understandable anger in this room about that.
But there are special issues around Northern Ireland.
I agree with that very much, and you've expressed it extremely well, particularly the recklessness with which people who were playing fast and loose with the situation in Northern Ireland, that's been a disgrace. But the fact is that the agreement that's now been reached, improvement though it is still an attempt to restore for Northern Ireland some of what it has lost. And I think it still reflects on the fact that we have all lost that economic opportunity, that economic benefit that came from being in the EU. Northern Ireland also benefited from being in the EU because the issues about what the border meant, they could mean different things to different people. It didn't have to be crystallised in the way that now has to happen outside of the EU.
I think the only other thought that I would draw from it is it would seem a rather strange conclusion from the last 7 years of the discussion about the Northern Ireland border to think that an England-Scotland border question post-independence is going to be easy to resolve. It's clearly resolvable. It's also clearly going to be very difficult.
Let me run around the audience here. Lady in the line.
Do you genuinely think that we can measure Brexit when we've just gone through COVID? You know, a worldwide closure. How can we really genuinely measure Brexit and its effects?
Well, you think there may be still benefits to come that we can't see yet?
Okay.
Well, we can identify the differences because every other country had COVID as well.
Man in the front row.
Yeah, I mean, the trade with the EU is only 19% and the trade with the UK is almost 60%. I mean, there's 27 countries in the EU, yet we only really trade with 8 of them. So how's that going to improve as an independent Scotland?
Okay, and lady in the blue top, yes.
I think there's a couple of points I wanted to make. First of all, when it comes to discussing anything political, it is a divisive matter because even within a family, people will have different views. So I'd like to kind of park that to one side. When it comes to Scotland itself, we have an ageing population. We do not have enough working age adults. It is a very serious issue. We have different requirements than south of the border. We need our own home office. We need to be able to get people over here from Europe to actually boost our population. And if we are able to do those things under devolvement from Labour, fine, but that's not what Keir Starmer is offering.
We need immigration.
We need immigration very, very badly. And to be able to get these people here, that's the only way we can do that. And if we want to then go on looking at trading with other countries, I hardly think that we're England's biggest trading partner too. Do do you really think they're going to cut their own noses off despite their faces by saying, if you're independent, we won't trade with you?
Okay, let me just go to this lady here. Yes, on you go.
Is it Martin Geisler did a programme recently, and he said that statistics showed that for us having individuals coming into Scotland, the majority came from England first. Before other nations. So to say that it's all about immigration is not right. Yes, I agree that immigration helps, but that's not the total answer.
OK, you'll have your own views at home, I know, about this. The hashtag is BBCDN on social media to get involved in the conversation. This next question came up from a lot of our audience tonight here in Glenrothes, and it comes from John Dougal. John, where are you? On you go, John.
Due to the ongoing youth crime in our towns and the police losing control, what's going to be done about it as people are scared to walk about the streets?
John, tell us, people watching all over Scotland tonight, tell us what's going on and what you're particularly concerned about.
I mean, the last 2 weeks, there's been 2 teens severely attacked in the Glenrothes area. And the youths today are just getting a slap on the wrist and said, it's okay, on you go. There's nothing being done. The police have lost control, the schools have lost control, and the government need to do something about it to make them realise they get punished.
Yeah, there's a lot of people nodding in the audience. I want to hear your experiences of this. But David Clegg, Willie Rennie, local MSP, said there's been a conspiracy of silence around this. As a newspaper editor, are you aware of that?
I'm certainly aware of growing concerns in Glenrothes, but not only Glenrothes, in the wider area that we cover across Tayside and Fife about youth disturbances at night. I know there was this horrible incident at the bus station just last week in Glenrothes, and I think that's been the focus for some of this. But I think there's a couple of issues. It's about there's a concern, and we get this regularly in our mailbag. There's a concern that the police are overstretched, so they are taking an operational decision to leave some of the youth disturbance that they would previously have attended, and that is causing an amplifying effect. And there's also, I think, a wider problem about young people in the post-COVID era about this is not necessarily just about Glenrothes, but a lack of activities for them in the evening, boredom, and the problems that can cause. And what worries me about it is this is coming at a time when we know police budgets are going to be stretched further. We've heard the departing Chief Constable warning about what that is going to mean for the future. And this is an issue that flares up occasionally, and there's been a particular problem here recently, but I feel it's the same issue everywhere. We're from the perspective of the Courier, we're hearing it in Dundee, we're hearing it in Perth, we're hearing it in some of the Angus towns as well. So I'm not sure if there's been a conspiracy of silence. The Courier certainly hasn't been silent about it. We've been reporting on it and asking for answers, but I definitely think it's a matter of deep concern.
We get questions about this all round Scotland on debate night, but so many questions from here tonight. What's going on here?
I think you've got to look at it as well. It's not just it's within schools too. We've seen recently on the news videos coming out of fights. I know my son, he's away to start high school next year, and on some Snapchat groups that he's on, people send videos of fights, which has now left him thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to go to high school next year. He's actually had a talk from the principal teachers, and they had to explain to the students why not to film the fighting. And I think saying that we need to be tougher, yes, they do need to be punished, but where's the prevention? Where's the support for schools? Children spend as much time at school as they do at home. Where's the support for the schools to be able to teach these children and prevent these incidents from happening, as well as having control in the school? Because you are right in what you're saying, there is not a lot for young people to do round about. They are going out, they've got nothing to do, they get bored. We also know that in post-COVID, again with the rising cost of living crisis, mental health services for children are absolutely stretched to bursting. Parents can't get help when they're begging for it. So where's the prevention in this? It's a very knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, well, we just need to give the police more power, we need to lock them all up, we need to punish them all. But where's the prevention in stopping any of this from happening?
Right, OK. John Nicholson. You sit on the DCMS committee. You've been looking into this. What can be done about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots, it goes without saying that there's lots of different types of crime. You know, some types of crime, like homicides, are dramatically down 40% over 10 years. But as you say, on the select committee that I said, we've been looking at the kind of bullying that kids are subjected to online. And I saw the most terrible video recently of a school not far from here where a wee girl was horribly beaten up. And I've been involved in getting something called Zach's Law introduced. Now, Zach's a brilliant wee boy. He lives with epilepsy. And I didn't realise this, but some people, unbelievably, send flashing images to children in order to trigger epileptic seizures, which can kill them. Now, if you push somebody under a bus and they die, you'll be off to the jail. If you send a flashing image to somebody and they have an epileptic seizure and fall under a bus, there is no criminal penalty. So we've addressed that, I hope, with the online safety bill, because the big difference between when you and I were growing up is there were always bullies, but you could escape at the end of the day and go back, and with a bit of luck, you'd be home and safe with your family. Now these thugs and bullies can bully children from the moment they get up in the morning to the moment they go to bed. And the big social media companies, Facebook and others, do almost nothing to tackle it. And I think we've got to get tough with the social media companies and
what does that mean? What should you do to them?
I think you should hit them with punitive fines. Germany did this, and the immediate result was that Facebook took on a huge number of monitors to take down harmful content. And we've not been nearly tough enough with these companies, which make vast profits, because only by being tough with them will we help to reduce the amount of harmful content, a lot of it aimed at children.
John, can I just ask if you think Westminster, because it's obviously your remit,
yes,
is it equipped to deal with that? Because I worry about whether they have the capacity there or whether there's the appetite for it.
Do you mean in Westminster or the social media companies?
No, I mean to take them on. Do they have the institutional knowledge there? I mean, the experience, we did the story on the Wade Academy video, and our social media team found, I can't remember the number now, but it was hundreds of social media accounts in Tayside and Fife, not even looking any wider, solely dedicated to videos of children being bullied. We flagged them up to the social media companies, and it took them 10 days just to take them down.
You're absolutely right. And the algorithms, which are the systems by which if you look at one harmful video, it will then feed you other harmful videos, are particularly invidious. There's a wee girl called Molly Russell who took her own life. Now, she was looking at self-harm videos, and the algorithm started feeding her more and more videos, encouraging her to commit suicide. In answer to your question, David, there is a mood, I think, at Westminster, because some of these select committees, people just see the yaboo sucks at Westminster, and sometimes the select committees, you get folk of goodwill, cross-party, working hard to try and resolve something. I think that's happened with the online safety bill. There are some people, there are some Conservatives in particular, who for philosophical reasons don't want to restrain freedom of speech. But they're in a minority, and I think a majority of people cross-party really do want to tackle this.
I want to hear more from the audience on this and what the real-life experiences of this. Man on the front row.
I think a lot of it's to do with poverty as well, because parents can't give their children money to go out and do activities, or there's not enough for them to go to youth clubs and whatever else. So they get bored and they're in gangs and, go and do that as a thrill. I think that's got a lot to do with it.
Hang on a sec, don't shout, I'll come to you in just a sec. Lady in the row behind you.
Or sometimes the parents are that busy on social media themselves, they don't know what the kids are up to.
Yeah. And man in the back here.
And do you know what the school policy is for if your child gets bullied? They actually let your child out of school early and end up telling them to stay off school for 3 or 4 days till it calms down. So your child that's getting bullied is the one that's losing out in their education while the bullies are still allowed to go to school. Well, how is that right?
John, you asked the question. What do you think needs to happen?
Not one of the panels answered my question. What's going to be done, what can be done about the youth crime? When I was younger, the police used to walk the beat. When do you see that now? Never. Because they're understaffed.
OK, Ross McCaw.
What's going to be done?
I actually wanted to come back to not only the original question, but the point made here, because you're right, there is an issue with crime, and literally cuts on our police force, and we've seen that. I mean, we've had we've just seen it happening, and we've actually seen the Chief Constable resign and highlighting the cuts that are happening in the police force. So obviously there's a problem there, and there needs to be more done there. And it's not just about bringing in tougher. It's about making sure that we have community police. It's about making sure that we have the people on the street to be able to talk and actually communicate with children. But also, it has to marry in with education. It actually has to marry in with what our teachers are doing, and we've gone too far in the opposite direction. Teachers aren't able to teach anymore. That's what they got into the profession to do, was to actually educate children, but unfortunately that's moved away from that. So what we've got is unruly behaviour in a classroom. It's not being able to be controlled. The gentleman at the back is 100% correct, because what we're actually looking at is the person who is the victim and moving them out, so they're having to take on the punishment, in effect, for something that wasn't their fault. And it's all moved in entirely the wrong direction. So in answer to your question is basically, we almost have to reverse that, like 100%. We need to look at the cuts. We need to look at the community police on the ground so that they can speak to young kids, so that they can help them, so they can cajole them. We do also have to look at social media. I'm not going to take that out, but we also have to give our teachers the ability to do the job that they're to do.
OK, but Pam Duncan-Glancy, Pam.
So I actually think that what you're describing, and we're seeing it in Glasgow, the area I represent, and there is an increase in crime, and people do feel the streets are unsafe. I think it is a sorry reflection of the degradation of society that we're living in right now as a result of genuinely decades of mismanagement and cuts, both to the police force but also to local authority services. So we've heard throughout some of the discussion tonight, we've heard about boredom that kids are experiencing. Libraries are closing. You know, leisure centres that used to be open have to shut, particularly the cuts to local authority funding and budgets means that they're having to make these decisions which are cutting off these places that young people used to go. And then when we look at what's happening in schools, teachers haven't had a pay rise, and they've had like 10% pay cuts in the last few years. Now, we're in a situation where they're on strike now. So we've got a poor situation in our schools for our children, young people and our teachers. We've got a poor situation in our local communities for our libraries, our leisure centres and places for people to go. I'm not surprised that we're in the situation we're in, and then we don't have police to police it. So it is a sorry reflection of the state that I have to say both governments have got us into.
OK, I want to hear just more people in the audience and what it's really like here. Man there.
So there's been a lot of emphasis on the lack of activities and interest for children or young people, and it's leading to violence. But is there not a much deeper issue in society that we cultivate a glorification and a love of violence? I mean, how many adults in this room stayed up late last weekend to watch two roided-up thugs beat each other? And then we're surprised that kids go out and replicate that.
And lady in the red top in the row behind you.
I think as well, you know, there's been severe cuts to police in the term of the SNP government, and also a lot of things have been mentioned here about children's mental health services. The NHS has taken such a hit over the years in lowering the amount of money that is available. We can't now get the professionals that we need. We're not educating the professionals that we need, and we have nobody to help these children, whether they are the perpetrator or not, to get through these difficulties that they are facing in their lives that perhaps make them do these things.
Thank you. Patrick Harvey.
Yeah, I mean, some of this, as John was describing, is very new. It comes from the social media age, and it exacerbates a problem. Some of it, I think, more of what David was describing is more long-standing. It's real-world violence. You know, it's not connected to that social media. I think the history shows that the effective work on that more traditional violence that does crop up, it comes in ebbs and flows in different parts of the country from time to time. The effective work on that is not necessarily just about policing or coming down hard on people. It is around working with people. It's around violence reduction and addressing the reasons why people are bored, why young people are bored or are being drawn into that kind of behaviour. I would happily come down like a ton of bricks on the social media companies. I would happily take an enforcement-led, punitive approach with them. I mean, I think, believe it or not, if you can believe it, about a lifetime and a half ago, I used to be a youth worker. And it was very, very clear that there is huge creativity and huge capacity within youth work that is different from policing. It's also different from formal education, from the school environment. It's of huge value. Now, at the moment, you know, it's very easy, of course, to say we should be spending more money on all of this, and I would love to be spending more money on all of this. And if the UK government inflation-proofs the Scottish budget, their budget next week or two, then we'll be able to spend more money on all of it. But what we've managed to do, in the current year, is not just inflation-proof local government. They've had a real terms increase for local government, but we've also introduced and then increased the Scottish child payment.
All right,
that
David
means
Blake, you want to come back in on that?
The poorest third of households with families, £1,200 a year better off.
I think the one thing that really struck me there while you're talking, Patrick, is what you're talking about there is the benefits of working with young people, getting them early, targeted intervention, doing it properly. And this is the same week where money for the Big Noise project in Dundee and Aberdeen, carried out by Systema Scotland, a project I've seen the benefit of firsthand, that was helping 500 children in Dundee each week. I don't know the number in Aberdeen so well. That was the week that their funding was withdrawn by the councils. And these projects will certainly now have to be dialed down if they're not facing an uncertain future altogether. Surely that is exactly the opposite of what you would want to see happening in this situation.
And I absolutely recognise that council budgets, just like the NHS budget, just like police budgets, just like the whole Scottish budget, is under severe pressure because of the inflation increases that are eroding the value of public budgets. Just as they're eroding the value of household budgets, they're eroding the value of taxpayers' money that's being spent by the government. This is an incredibly challenging time, but what we've managed to achieve is a budget that is redistributive, a budget that does take a bit more from high earners and from second homeowners, people who can afford to pay, and redistribute to those most needy.
You all came here tonight looking for answers on this. I'm not sure we've delivered them, but we'll come back to this, I know, again, in other parts of Scotland as well. Your views on all of that, the hashtag is BBCDN on social media. We've got time for one last question tonight, and it comes from Alistair McIntyre. Alistair, where are you? On you go.
Should alcohol advertising in Scotland be banned?
Right, this is the subject of a Scottish Government consultation which ends next week, in fact. Patrick Harvey, the proposal is a ban on all advertising of alcohol and promotion of alcohol as well. What do you think? Is that the way ahead? Here we are, Diageo, not far from here, major employer in this area. Careful.
Well, I mean, I think clearly we are consulting on it. So as a member of the Scottish Government, I'm not going to say what the outcome of that consultation should be. I think it's important that we listen to everybody's responses to that consultation. But I take the view that we should recognise the harm that alcohol does, and we should be willing to do more and to maybe take a risk sometimes to reduce that harm. You know, a few years ago, the proposal on minimum unit pricing for alcohol fell down. It was gutted from a bill because both the biggest political parties in Parliament saw political success as being knocking down the other's ideas.
And then we got it coming back,
on the back of the deposit
return scheme.
Everybody was saying that we need new ideas, and that's why we got minimum unit pricing and additional measures. So I do think we need to look at the impact that alcohol advertising can have. Maybe not quite in the same way as tobacco advertising, because there's no, you know, safe level for tobacco. But you know, most people think that alcohol can play a reasonable part in our lives, but it is problematic the extent to which it's
and would a ban on advertising and promotion, Pam Duncan-Glancy, change that?
So I worked in public health before I was an MSP, and I know, because I listened to lots of research on this as well, that the price of alcohol, the availability of alcohol and the marketing of alcohol makes a difference to the consumption of alcohol in a society. And we know that in Scotland we have to reduce the harms from alcohol in Scotland. But there's a bigger picture than marketing. We have to also address the availability of it, and we also have to address the fact that people, I think people are really, really struggling to see how changing the marketing of alcohol and changing the way that they see how it's portrayed is going to make a difference to how much they consume. We know it does, and the science says it does, but what we need to do is take people with us, help them understand what the relationship between that marketing and alcohol consumption is. Otherwise, we're going to get into a situation where, yet again, probably the public feel that something is being done that they don't understand and they can't see why it's going to help. But we do desperately have to reduce the harm from alcohol.
Well, I just want to come in because whisky is phenomenal in Scotland. It is. We should be so proud of it. I mean, it's something that we sell all around the world. We are renowned for it. Scotch whisky is the best. I'm not going to even bother.
We also have one of the worst alcohol problems in Europe.
We do, and we do have to recognise that we do have that issue, but we should find a way that works properly, because I actually agree with Pam on our last comment, because if we don't do this properly, and if we don't look at ways to do it where we take everybody along with us, then we're going to have an issue. And people are going to be saying, it's not going to work. And this is the same issue that happened time and time again. We don't take everybody along with any of the ideas for whatever the best reason is, because what happens at the end of it, everybody is concerned.
John Nicholson, you on board with this?
I don't know, is the answer. I'm always interested in evidence-based policy making. I can very much see the arguments on both sides. We've clearly got an alcohol problem in Scotland. We've clearly got a wonderful alcohol industry in my own constituency. We have wonderful distilleries, the oldest one in the country. I'll be very interested to read in detail the consultation. I think Patrick makes a good point. There's a big difference. It's often lumped in with tobacco advertising, but I think there's a difference because there's no safe amount of cigarettes that you can have. You can get lung cancer even if you've got the mildest cigarette habit.
Sorry, we've only got a minute left, John. So
on balance, probably not, but I'll listen carefully to the arguments.
David Clegg.
I need to declare an interest. I've actually read the proposal document, largely because it proposes banning all print advertising of alcohol, which would have an impact on my livelihood. So with that context, I will say I think what we need to... There's no doubting that there's a significant alcohol problem in Scotland, and it needs new measures to address it. It's equally the case that what proposed in this document would wreak economic chaos, not just to newspapers, because I know people won't care so much about that, but also about the events industry, which have just had COVID, are really struggling right now, and some of the proposals in there would wipe them out.
But isn't this what people said about tobacco sponsorship and tobacco advertising?
Right. We have no more time on this, Patrick. The consultation closes next week. We will come back to it, I know. That's it for tonight. We will be back next week in Greenock. The week after that, it is the Debate Night Leadership Special with all the candidates for First Minister from Edinburgh.